Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 269. The Anvil goes a-looping. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, explodingly yours, I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
They don't know what that means.
No, and I don't plan to explain that one. So
that's really a gross reference.
But not gross in the obvious way. Gross in an off way.
Yeah, and grossed out, I am Michael Miller. That was wrong.
Welcome back. Sitting happily in my chair.
That I don't believe.
I compared to earlier, yes, but welcome back. Today we're going to talk a little bit about building a time loop story. And normally when I do interactive fiction, I don't do a lot with characters before I start running the game. Not into building the story, and I do a little bit through like character creation process. I like to talk to people about their characters because you kind of want a story, to be able to showcase each of the characters, have scenes to showcase all of the characters in your story. So there is some importance in knowing it. And you also want to be able to work a backstory and playing GURPS. There could be advantages or disadvantages that come into play. But typically, like I think we did this for the not the wine steward. Was the wine steward the second one? No, what was I don't even remember what the second one was. I just remember the wine steward.
Well, there was the heist.
The heist, that was what it was. The heist one we did a lot more behind the scenes. Michael got involved a lot more in it, which I think in the setting of the show, it's a little bit more interesting. Mm-hmm. And Michael kind of needs to know a little bit more. It was a bit long. This one, I don't know how long it will be because the center crux is it's going to be a time loop. And Michael's idea. But I think it's a great idea. I think it's an interesting thing. I've never really played around with much. I've seen several things with time loops, several episodes of science fiction like to get into time loops. Like any long-running science fiction show that's probably been on for 6 or more seasons has an episode on time loop. Groundhog's Day, I think, is probably the most famous time loop thing. I mean, is there anything more famous than that you can?
I think it's one of the best. For our younger listeners,
they might not know what you're saying.
Right. Our younger listeners may know Happy Death Day, which is a time loop story.
Oh, okay.
That is much newer. But
I've not heard of it. I'm so old. So
if you're not familiar with Groundhog's Day, it's a fantastic Bill Murray movie about a man caught in a time loop on Groundhog's Day. It is hilarious. It's heartfelt. It's clever. It's just a fantastic movie all around.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about it was it broke from a lot of the tropes. I mean, typically, and I don't even know if I can go as much for saying tropes with this because where it sort of is around everything, it's like a story plot, like I said, in a TV show somewhere, I've not read a lot of like fiction really on time looping or anything like that. There's a lot of time travel, but that's different. That's actually completely different. And there's a lot of different things you have to think about, but mainly for a time loop, the thing is, there's a period of time which loops and there could be different things that cause it to reset.
There might be some. I wouldn't think that there's anybody listening that doesn't know, but I want to get a little more specific on a time loop. A time loop is basically like this: you have a character who is experiencing. In the case of Groundhog's Day, we'll use Groundhog's Day as an example, where he experiences the same day. And what happens is either the day ends, he goes to sleep, or he dies. But every next morning is the morning of Groundhog's Day. For him, again, everyone else, even though he's committing different acts and, trying different actions and doing different things, nobody else, of course, remembers it. For them, the day is occurring the same. But for him, he is remembering every single day. He's not aging, but he is remembering every single day. And there have been people that did the math on that movie, and I forget what it is. Maybe I'll look it up while we're talking. That he basically spent quite a few years.
He would have had to
on that day. Yeah, I mean he learned how to speak French fluently. He learned how to play the guitar. He learned how to play the piano. Like he learned a whole bunch of things that would take you, many, many, many hours of study and practice to master. So,
and usually what the idea is, there's some beginning time that is always the same. The ending time sometimes is the same, but sometimes you might have what to call a different limiter, so it might be like if you die, you just reset,
Oh, wait a minute. Edge of Tomorrow. Hello. I can't believe I didn't think of that. Edge of Tomorrow is another huge time looping movie that was incredibly successful.
Yeah. In a way, too, think about you play a video game, that's kind of how it is in most video games, unless you're like an Iron Man mode where, it's like if you keep getting killed the boss, it's like a time loop. And the thing is, a lot of us have struggled with this in our lives where we feel like we keep going back to first base because we screw something up and you have to start over trying to move around. I think it's something a lot of people can latch on to because we've all had moments of our lives that feel really repetitive and they become monotonous, like work, generally does. If you like your job, there are probably certain tasks in it that if you're doing a lot, it makes it feel more boring than doing other parts of the job. So, even when I was programming, it felt very repetitive. It was like completely different applications, sometimes in different languages, but still to me, I was making a widget. And the widget did something, and it was in a way people would do something and then they would get an output. So it was like doing the same thing over and over again. It looked different. There were different rules, so there are parts of it that were interesting, but generally abstractly, it was sort of having the same day over and over again for years. And
I kind of got a little bit of that going on at work these days.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I think it kind of depends a lot on the type of work you do. I think the more proficient you become at your work is going to feel this way. Commuting to work is the ultimate time loop. To the part where sometimes you could drive to work and not remember starting your car.
Yeah, I've absolutely done that.
When you go to the same location or when you drive home, the same thing. Weren't you supposed to stop for milk? And I went right past the grocery store and I did not even realize. I just kept going until I got here. Whoops. But so there are a few important parts, but I think the biggest thing is any good time loop thing I've ever seen. It's about the characters and who know, and it's not always one character. Sometimes it's a couple characters, typically in team stuff. It's like one person is caught in the time loop and they might end up getting part or all of their team in with them to start remembering somehow. Because you have limiters, then you have acquisitions. So there are ways you can, acquire new stuff, so it's like whether it's the new skills by spending years in it, like Bill Murray did, or a lot of times you'll have an additional limiter, which is like, you realize that even though the day keeps repeating, it shortens like 5 minutes every time or something like that, where the bubble is shrinking and your chance to escape it, basically gets less and less likely every time. So you can also limit the day like that as well too. And, I think in some kind of gaming fashion, you need something like that, or else you're going to have a bunch of very clever players say, I'm going to spend the next 75 years mastering swordplay up to level 25. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to work out until my health is at like 720, even though max human is at 20.
Well, I mean, you could arguably say that, you remember doing those things, but you cannot acquire the skills, so that although you remember things,
yeah, that would be a different way of living.
You can't master it. And as far as the working out goes, no one said that their body resets that their body is.
Did not, yeah. Oh yeah,
you know?
And that might go back. But once again, those are limitations that you have to kind of think about, especially in an interactive fiction, where because one of the things we're about to get to is what day one looks like, and that's an ideal day one, because that's kind of important. But the two biggest things are you need to know what your protagonist is, because it's about the character in the story. It's their reactions, their frustrations, and their joys throughout this journey, which are what people really identify with. And if the character isn't good and does not grow and does not change, at least as a character, then it hurts the people's ability to connect with it.
I just got a fantastic idea.
Okay.
But I don't know how much of it I can share with the audience if we're going to do this as a delivered mini campaign.
Yeah.
But I have a really good idea for the character and for the plot line. But then again, some of it might come out pretty easily. Okay, we're going to talk about this off air, because I got something.
Yeah, plotline we'll talk about off air. If there are any tidbits that you think that they might want to know of your protagonist up front, what is it?
Well, I definitely want to make the character. I don't know if you had, because previously you've had a big hand in the character creation. I would like to have a bigger hand in the character creation this time, and because I really want to flesh it out. I really want to know this character well before we start.
Well, this one you need to.
That's my thought as well.
And also, I mean, if you just want to make a straight GURPS character, even if we only play lights, but if you want to make it up that way, so you really get into it, because
might help me.
My antagonist, I know how he's going to play off of your character, but your character is going to be the most important part of the story, like I said.
So you have an antagonist
in mind.
Did you have a plot line in mind?
Oh, of course I had a plot line in mind. It's modifiable, but I have a plot line in mind.
Because what I have in mind is pretty dominant. So we'd have to build around it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there could also be two things, because once again, this is a time loop story. So Michael's character might even have a plot going on within the context of what I have set up. And part of it is, maybe he has to give up on his plot to be able to do escape or something something along those lines to help get out.
When you say my character may have a plot, do you mean my character may have an agenda?
Yeah. You might set day one. You know what I'm saying? That might be up to your character. And that probably is going to be largely up to your character, since you're the only player in this game. So essentially what you're trying to achieve, or what you think the story your character is involved with, is that becomes day one. And day one, typically the way I would do day one is I'd have a sequence of events I would try and lure characters to. And this is kind of how I game master in general, right? I have major scenes. I have some alternate scenes, because there's some obvious ways that characters might go in a slightly different direction than you want them to, story-wise. Sometimes there's off-the-hip scenes. And then something I think that you need for time loop stories, at least ones that I enjoy, are random off-the-wall scenes. And you're going to want a few of these sort of like salt seasoning the story as it goes through, not in day one probably, although you might foreshadow it in day one. You want these random scenes that seem to come out of left field, that break up the monotony for the viewer, not for the person involved in it, because it's happening over and over and over and over to them. But it's also bringing in the idea of, in the monotony of life, sometimes something comes out of left field. You want a few of those kind of events peppered in too. So The interesting thing with that is it's like sort of like think of like random encounters from Dungeons and Dragons. You want a couple special scenes that are like a random adventure, so you can pull out if the player goes in a direction you don't expect. You can throw something wacky at them, and maybe that's even part of the overall plot. Is the further they go away for what needs to happen, maybe they're being forced in a direction, and when they try and go away, they're being looped back after something crazy happens. So you can even make that a little bit more predominant if you want to. But you also need a closing scene. You know, you need the idea of what needs to be accomplished by the player or character. I'm sorry, to be able to end the loop. And is there a way that you want to end the loop against them? Obviously, you're going to foreshadow and threaten it. You know, if you're going to pull the trigger, how do you crush them? You know, I mean, you need to know that as well, too, because, you know, especially like, say, if you have an extreme limiter where if they don't get in 6 days, they can't complete it. You know, what happens if they fail the 6th time? You know, how do you help the characters, especially if they're players, acquire the information they need? Because that's always one of the keys. And I think it's in Stargate. I think all of the seasons of Stargate or all the series of Stargate have had an episode like this where someone's caught in a time loop and they're trying to pull their friends out and their friends don't believe them, or sometimes they can figure out a way to do it, but then they need someone else to help in a different way. How do you get this person, you know, to help you, even though that you know they won't believe you? And it brings in a lot of dynamics that you can play with. But the thing is, ultimately, you need one character, the protagonist of that story, at least to be able to retain the information, you know, on how to try a different path to try and break the time loop. So, you know, you need some kind of reveal, probably for day 2 scene, you know, unless you really want to drag it out on people. But, you know, probably in your day 2 scene where they figure out they can change what has happened.
Unless you really want to drag it out.
Yeah, unless you really want to drag it out. I mean, you could literally do a time loop campaign that lasts for years.
I don't think you caught what I did there.
I'm sorry, what did you do there?
Dragon, as in flying, dragon out.
Yeah, no, I didn't get it. Okay. I would have really laughed if I got it though.
That's what I thought you would have too. That's why you're like, if you really want to drag it out, I was like, dragon out, and you're like, yeah, drag it out, and I'm like, no, dragon out.
But, you know, and it's like one of those things where you need an agreement or a rule set, and you need to make sure your players pick up on it. And that's the point of the game, is to torture them. Like, you can play a Wraith game, which the whole point of Wraith is to torture players anyway. Mm-hmm. So in a Wraith game, you maybe put the Wraiths in time loops so they can not really interact with the world. And it's the exact same story, game session after game session. So until they figure out how to break their time loops.
There was a episode
that would be extra cruel.
There was an episode of DC's Legends of Tomorrow that I watched recently. That was a time loop episode, and that might have been the impetus of me thinking of this. I
think most of the the CW. I'm sorry, not WB. That would be crazy. The CW superhero shows have all had a season like that as well too.
Well, this was just an episode, not a whole season, and that that show is all about time travel. Like, that's what
It makes a lot of sense in their show. But I'm pretty sure I've seen it in Flash. I'm pretty sure I've seen it on Arrow.
Well, they're doing like Flashpoint in Flash, so there's been a lot of time travel there too.
Okay.
You know? And a whole correcting the mistakes of one timeline has been an ongoing theme in Flash. So
yeah. Well, because very early they screw with the timeline, and you don't screw with the timeline. Speed Force does not like it.
No, that is true. The Speed Force does not like that at all.
Yeah, and there's one other thing too that I think can be missed when plotting out your time loop story, and that is, what are the irritations?
Irritations?
You know, there's like the things that are designed to rub the character the wrong way. And it shouldn't be the whole thing, but it's the guy with that voice that grates. and so every day you bump into this guy in the hallway, and he just approaches you in exactly the wrong way, and to him he's doing it once, and he's probably,
but it's happening hundreds of
times to the person. So you need like those irritations so you can see the reaction change and become more frustrated over time with the characters. And those are the things, and they're not necessarily, I call them irritations. They could be pleasantries, as well too. It doesn't necessarily have to be irritation, but it's those, you need those sort of pinpointed events that happen that people can, that you should see a certain emotion from, oh, look, that guy just saved the woman crossing the street, and everyone cheers, and you're cheering day one. By day 30, you're like, and you push them both out in the street or something like
that.
Right. And so, it gives the character a chance to do inappropriate interactions with it, or go over the top in the response to take it too far. And the irritations, as I call them, is just a good way to bring in some life, because like I said, it's really, this kind of a story is a character-driven story. You have a couple important scenes, but besides that, I think there's going to be a lot of agility on my side to be able to go, and Michael's kind of an off-the-cuff kind of player too. So
or we just plan a lot of it out. I like the idea of doing it organically, but that might be a little too taxing on us. Like, that'd be fine if we were just sitting at a table and playing.
Yeah.
But to do it as a deliverable,
would be a lot more difficult. Yeah.
Thing for the show, it might be a little bit too much to ask.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll start dealing with some of that in probably after the next episode, because I want to build the protagonist. Do you not want to cover the protagonist?
We can cover the protagonist.
So now from the irritations, we also need to think of some other things as well too. And this is always good whenever, for any kind of story, right? You need some real black herrings.
Yeah, I saw this in the notes. What do you mean by a black herring? I know what a red herring is.
It's really red herring.
Oh, okay.
I would just be smart, but essentially it's black because it's like, it's depressing because you think this is the key and it fails. Or you can never quite do it. For whatever reason, it's, if you try and do this, it is the wrong thing. It will not end your day. There we go. And so for black herrings, some need to be obvious, like, okay, if I can actually achieve what I want to achieve, then I can get through this and move on. But the thing is, you want them to achieve the black herring. So once they get to that point, and then the loop continues, dagger twist in, they wake up the next day like, no, I think one of the rules for this one's going to be, if you die or you pass midnight, and I'm saying midnight here, but it might not technically be midnight, but there'll be a point of time that when you pass, if you've not completed it, or if you die during the day, it will just restart the day. What breaks the time loop? This is something I don't want to reveal here, but like I said, and I'm coming back to this one because it's really that important. You really need to understand what is going to break the time loop and how the character learns the information. Because say, okay, there's a blade of grass that must be ripped in the middle of the courtyard at 12 noon on a Thursday, and today's Thursday, so I guess let's say it's a one-day thing. So picking the day is kind of ridiculous, but there's like one blade of grass, just left of the rock, 4 blades over, that he must rip at noon precisely, without a clock, because it's the freaking Bronze Age. At precisely noon, he has to break this blade of grass to break the time loop. I mean, you could have that as like the way you do it, but it's going to be impossible to ever figure out unless maybe he's a gardener.
And a Time Lord.
Well, it just happens to cut that blade of grass at noon, it's almost lunch. I know it's not going to work, so I'm just going to go cut the lawn now.
Oh, cut the lawn, yeah.
So you might get it by chance. Yeah, it would be very, very difficult for a character. So you need your key scenes, so it's kind of like I want to have day one and I want to have alternate day, which is the last day. What are the series of things that have to happen? And they might not all have to happen, but you need to know that as a storyteller. What are the key scenes that need to happen in a day to be able to break the loop?
So multiple criteria. So it's not just a singular thing.
It could be a singular thing, but I think it's a little bit better with some criteria. And I kind of have an idea of what's going to be happening. So
I'm trying to think of is there video games like this? I'm trying to think of.
I'm sure. I mean, like I said, all video games are really like this because you die, you start your save point.
Yeah, true.
To those pesky survival games that just kill you off for good. And you start the whole game over. So it's the same thing, just longer.
There is a game I am thinking of that kind of has a mechanic like this. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's an Xbox One game. I think it was on the PlayStation as well.
So, but once again, a lot of stuff kind of drives off a plot. And really what I'm doing is I'm kind of giving you the things I'm thinking about and going through building the plot together. And then the last thing is, are there other limiters? And if you have a really large table, you might want to have some kind of limiter, because I know a lot of times players don't like working together. It's like built into their DNA. Like, no, my character's going to go shopping today. You need something to build urgency in characters. Now, it could, like in this story, we've talked a little bit, and this week you won't hear in the episode, but we talked a little bit about our plot ideas kind of meshed together. So,
which is good. Great minds really think cool. Alike.
That's right. So I give Michael credit for having a great mind today. And but the nice thing is,
even a broken clock. See how that was on theme?
There will be some built-in limiters which will keep the pace moving. But if the pace gets pulled too down, you get too separated from repeatable irritation scenes. Then what happens is it loses its effect on the players, because every time I get up, I walk out the door and the guy accidentally slaps the pie into my face.
Now, my thought here is that what might get tricky is, I mean, we're talking about a loop, and we tend to take our time with these sessions. But for the listeners, and I don't know that this is something that the listeners, if they're going to create their own time loop in a thing, need to be concerned about. So if you're creating your time loop in a thing, if it's for players, for like tabletop role playing, this is probably not going to be a problem for you, because you can take your time and keep doing it. But since we're going to be doing it for you guys are going to come along for the ride. We have to maybe make this really short, so that in a session they'll experience at least
a whole day.
At least one, if not multiple loops.
Well, it also kind of depends on the planned loop, right? Because, like I said, you have the one-off ideas in your head. So some loops might be very short, especially in the idea where he wakes up and an alien spacecraft crashes in his room and blows him up. That will not be happening, because I hate ancient alien references. But it's something that could happen in the story. But that'd be a really short day. But you want one consequential day, or maybe two. But the idea is, once you go through the scene, your first episode should be probably one scene, and that's your day one scene. It should maybe come close or whatever to what you want the people interact with it to see as the plot, whether or not that is the plot. What they see as the plot is right in front of them at that point. But it covers and you probably don't want them to die in that day. You probably want them to hit the time limit and restart, just because they understand that, wait, this is it. This is the last moment I have. So you kind of feed a lot of information to the player in that one day. But the thing is, when you repeat the scenes, you don't have to go into all the details again. It's like you need to pull out a little bit of the details each time. And so when they get to that scene where they walk into the big luxurious banquet, and which gets described out in the first day, becomes, you push the food out of the way as you walk over to your seat, and you knock the wine glass into the lady's lap, whatever the responses are. It becomes more bam, bam, bam in those irritation scenes, the scenes that they keep interacting with.
Good point.
But if they're new scenes, though, those should take a longer amount of time and then shrink down as they go forward. Because the thing is, even in a game, and this is where I'll disagree with what Michael said, you want the days to be short, because you want the players to feel the irritation of meeting that guy with a grating voice every day, again and again. The guy selling him the encyclopedia set, which is really not known by half the people in the world anymore. Keep showing up at the door trying to sell me, the Encyclopedia Britannica again. It's not going to happen, or maybe one day it does. Whatever. I'm sick of being this salesman. And so, think of other limiters. If you don't think the story will keep, and some of them are going to be artificial, where you start pulling out, details and leaving in the patterns for people of the scene, so you can feed them the pattern and just watch the reaction and let them play off of it. And their character will drive through that scene. And that's really the key. So a lot of detail. You shrink it down the more times they run into it. Keep the days short enough to where the characters, if they're interactive, or the readers or watchers or players, get that feeling when they start over and over. All right. So I think that's really pretty much it for this episode.
No more specific details that about what we're going to build?
Okay. Basic timeline. This will be pre anything that we've ever talked about for the show. This will be back in the days of the Kingdom of Bedrakis, when they had a king. And so the basic idea is Mike's character is going to show up
Michael.
to court. I'll talk about the antagonist first, but Michael's character will also be showing up to court that day. And we'll say it from Michael's perspective. And his character will come there with an agenda, which at this point I don't want to release any information on it, but we might in our first Let's Build episode off of it.
Yeah, I think it'll probably come up
It would make sense for it to come up in the character development. So actually I will mention it here, and I'll force it there, which he is showing up to court with the intention of killing the king that day. Now, this is back in blah, 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 in Earth terms, like blah, blah, blah BC. This is like Bronze Age territory here. There's no sophisticated weapons detection devices, although I'm not saying there isn't, because of magic. There could be more than you expect. But still, it's not like trying to kill a king or queen in the world today would be much more of a difficult process. Kings and queens got murdered all the time. And if he's planning to do it at the court, typically the guard is down of the person because they have guards, and who wants to throw their life away? Someone with an agenda. And Michael's that character. And so that will be kind of the day one premise, is trying to kill the king. And may the fun hijinks begin. But we're going to follow this up with a Let's Build episode, which we've been talking about doing too, where I want to go into more detail and actually build out Michael's character, because I do think the character here is so important. I don't want to build the antagonist online, because that might give away part of the plot. And the important details of the plot, not just raw details. So,
and to be clear, the antagonist is not the king.
Maybe. Okay. So for your world building task of the day, can you make up a good world building task of the day, Michael?
Why don't you think about how a time loop story could fit into something that you're doing, or just a time loop experience, how it might affect one of your characters, whether that's your main character or a subsidiary character. That doesn't matter much to the main plot of the project you're working on. Because you could have a character that's like, oh, this character's like totally badass, and like what's the character, the D&D character that you always make references to? Drist.
Oh, yeah.
So Drist might be super powerful just because he got stuck in a time loop and became the greatest fighter on the
planet. Yeah, that was
what I mean?
One day in our time.
Exactly, something like that, where it's like, oh, well, like he's so amazing. Yeah, he's only so amazing because he got 14 years to practice without any consequences that you and I suffer when we get hit by an axe.
Well, it's the classic story of you get beat up by the bully, every day. And then all of a sudden one day you're in the time loop and you learn how to fight in the time loop.
Right.
And then when you finally break through the time loop, the bully comes up and you beat him up in front of the crowd. That's a good 80s ending to a time loop. You finally beat that bully. But you probably wouldn't use violence in the 1980s version of that. You'd have found out another way to beat him.
No. There's you could plenty of violence.
Karate Kid kind of a storyline, I guess, too. I'm thinking more of Ski Lodge storyline. So you beat him in a big ski race or something. Rub it in really big, steal his girl.
That's always a
drive his dad's really nice car.
Turn his dad's Ferrari into a boat. I.e. One Crazy Summer.
And my thing is, go to the real world. The real world task, go share or come up with a quick tidbit of what your time loop would be. And I think some good ideas would be like the ending sequence of your story, like the leading up to the climax. There's usually lots of things that have to fall into place. You could do a time loop yourself and just say, what would happen if this happened? What would happen if that happened? And sort of brainstorm it off of a plot you've already built, but at a very consequential time. I just think it's a lot more meaningful if it's like approaching the climax of a real story, which Killing a King could be. So and it could really change the resolution if there's a time loop. So just, come up with a quick tidbit, quick idea. You don't have to share the details, but go to facebook.com/groups/Undercroft. And hopefully I can sit down long enough to be able to accept people in, and you can share your idea there. I'll probably do a Tuesday mini, hopefully on Tuesday. I've been really behind on those just due to being sick and then sick twice in a row. This is really unfair.
Send your well wishes to Jeff. He's had a rough couple of weeks.
Yep. So I would appreciate that. But go to Facebook. .com/groups/Undercroft. There'll be 3 questions. You answer them. As long as you're not like, yeah, we're going to spam you. Ha, 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 loser. I probably will let you in. So the other questions are really there to filter out the riffraff.
Yeah,
and we all know you're not the riffraff. So everyone have a good day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot. Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 269. The Anvil goes a-looping. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge,
break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java.